What if everything you thought you knew about Game of Thrones was just the surface of a much darker truth? The story you watched unfold on screen was merely the shadow of ancient conspiracies centuries in the making. Tonight, I'm going to reveal the 18 hidden patterns that George R.R. Martin wove into the very fabric of his world, patterns that change everything. Did you ever wonder why the Night King seemed to recognize Bran? Why dragons disappeared for centuries only to return with Daenerys? Why certain houses rose to power while others fell so completely? The answers lie in blood magic older than Valyria itself. These aren't wild speculations. They're the connections, hiding in plain sight, in the margins of ancient texts, in the symbolism of house sigils, in the prophetic dreams that haunt the bloodlines of Westeros. As you drift towards sleep, these revelations will transform how you understand the Game of Thrones itself. From secret Targaryen bloodlines flowing through unexpected veins to the true nature of the doom that destroyed the greatest civilization in history, prepare to see beyond the veil. The realm's deepest secrets await, and once revealed, you'll never view this world the same way again. Theory 1. The Stark Who Should Have Been King. The death of Brandon Stark, Ned's elder brother, at the hands of the Mad King set in motion the events that would lead to Robert's rebellion and forever alter the fate of Westeros. Yet what if Brandon had lived? Unlike his honorable brother Ned, Brandon possessed not only the wolf's blood, that wild, untamed, stark nature, but also a political acumen born of his preparation to rule the North. Where Ned saw the world in stark contrasts of honor and dishonor, Brandon navigated the grey areas with a cunning that earned him respect among southern lords during his time fostering away from Winterfell. Had Brandon survived to become Lord of Winterfell, his response to Lyanna's disappearance would have differed dramatically from his father's fatal confrontation at King's Landing. Brandon's network of allies, cultivated through years of diplomatic relations with houses, both great and small, would have allowed him to gather intelligence about his sister's true whereabouts without directly challenging the crown. His understanding of southern politics would have revealed Rhaegar's intentions not as abduction, but as political maneuvering, allowing him to approach the situation as a negotiation rather than a rescue. Most critically, Brandon would have recognized the dangerous game being played by houses Lannister and Baratheon, using stark honor as a catalyst for rebellion to further their own ambitions. Instead of rushing headlong into conflict, Brandon might have secured Lyanna's return through a formal betrothal between houses Stark and Targaryen, potentially installing his sister as a future queen while maintaining northern independence in all but name. The North remembers, but Brandon would have remembered that survival sometimes requires compromise. The realm would have been spared Robert's rebellion. The Targaryen dynasty might have continued under a reformed monarchy, and most importantly, the Seven Kingdoms would have remained united against the coming threat from beyond the Wall. When winter finally came, it would have found not a fractured continent exhausted by civil war, but a unified force led by houses with ancient blood. Ties to the magic needed to combat the darkness. In the songs never sung, Brandon Stark might have been remembered not as a victim of Targaryen madness, but as the wild wolf who prevented the realm from tearing itself apart when it needed unity most desperately. Theory 2. The Butterfly of Kings. Landingdoin Chaos Theory: a butterfly flapping its wings can cause a hurricane across the world. In Westeros, Ned Stark's fateful decision in the Godswood of King's Landing created a storm that consumed the Seven Kingdoms. When Renly Baratheon offered to seize Cersei's children before Robert's death to secure the transition of power with military force, Ned refused, bound by his rigid code of honor. "I will not dishonor Robert's last hours by shedding blood in his halls and dragging frightened children from their beds," he declared, sealing not only his fate, but that of thousands across the realm. This moment represents perhaps the most consequential decision in the entire saga, a true butterfly effect that rippled outward with devastating consequences. Had Ned accepted Renly's proposal, the immediate aftermath would have been morally questionable but strategically sound. Cersei and her children would have been secured, preventing their escape to Casterly Rock and cutting off Lannister options for succession claims. With Renly's 100 swords backing him, Ned could have properly secured the transition of power, potentially installing Stannis as rightful heir while maintaining his position as protector of the realm during the transition. The War of the Five. Kings would never have ignited. Without Joffrey on the throne, Stannis would have had no need to raise his banners against an illegitimate ruler. Robb Stark would not have called the Northern banners to rescue his father. Renly might have been persuaded to support his brother rather than crown himself. Balon Greyjoy would have found no opportunity to declare independence amid chaos. And perhaps most significantly, the Lannisters would have been denied the power to orchestrate the Red Wedding, sparing countless lives, including those of Catelyn and Robb Stark. Beyond the immediate political consequences lies an even more profound possibility. A united Seven Kingdoms would have been positioned to address the threat from beyond the Wall. Jon Snow's warnings from Castle Black would have reached a stable realm capable of mustering its full military might against the army of the dead. The Night's Watch would have received the reinforcements it desperately needed, rather than being left to fight alone, while kings squabbled over an iron chair. Perhaps most poignantly, the small folk, so often forgotten in the Game of Thrones, would have been spared the ravages of war. No Riverlands burned by Gregor Clegane, no sack of King's Landing by Daenerys Targaryen, no countless unnamed peasants slaughtered in fields and villages across the continent. All this suffering might have been avoided had Ned Stark, for once, chosen pragmatism over his unyielding honor in that quiet moment in the Godswood, when the fate of the realm hung on his response to Renly's outstretched hand. Theory 3. The gender of prophecy. The prince that was promised will bring the dawn. This prophecy, ancient and revered, guided the actions of key players throughout the saga. Rhaegar Targaryen became obsessed with it, believing first himself and then his son to be the promised prince. Melisandre sought the prince in Stannis Baratheon. Yet the revelation offered by Missandei in the Dragonstone throne room that the High Valyrian word for prince is gender-neutral points toward a deeper truth that transcends individuals entirely. What if the prophecy refers not to a single savior, but to the very concept of unity itself, the bringing together of opposing forces, specifically the joining of ice and fire bloodlines in the person of Jon Snow? This interpretation reframes our understanding of the prophecy's fulfillment. Jon's importance lies not in any single heroic action he performs, but in his very existence as the living embodiment of the Song of Ice and Fire, Stark and Targaryen blood unified in one person. This explains why Jon's paternity revelation seems anticlimactic in terms of his direct actions against the Night King. The prophecy was fulfilled the moment he was conceived, not through any later deed. His role was to exist as the bridge between opposing forces, between the North and Targaryen restoration, between the wildlings and the Night's Watch, between the living and the dead, through his own resurrection. Jon Snow represented the promised prince not through individual heroism, but through his function as a nexus point where conflicting elements could find harmony. Maester Aemon's deathbed realization supports this theory. In his fever, the elderly Targaryen Maester murmured about the translation error, suggesting the dragon has 3 heads. This wasn't merely about 3 dragon riders, but about the 3 aspects of the prophecy's fulfillment: the union of bloodlines, the gathering of divided forces against a common enemy, and the sacrifice of personal ambition for the greater good, all embodied in Jon Snow's journey. The prince that was promised prophecy thus becomes less about a messianic figure and more about the necessity of unity in the face of existential threat. Jon's decision to kill Daenerys represents the culmination of this principle. The sacrifice of his love and loyalty to his Targaryen heritage in service to the greater unity of the realm. By refusing the throne himself and choosing exile, he further embodies the prophecy's true meaning, that salvation comes not through power claimed, but through power surrendered for the common good. This interpretation explains why no single character, not Jon, Daenerys, or Arya, fits all aspects of the traditional hero prophecy. The prince was never meant to be an individual savior, but rather the principle of reconciliation between ancient opposites, a principle personified but not limited to Jon Snow. The dawn was brought not by a singular hero's action, but by the breaking of cycles of conflict that had defined Westeros for generations. Theory 4. Azor Ahai's Eternal Return. The legend of Azor Ahai echoes across cultures throughout the known world. The last hero in the north, the Lord of Light's champion in Essos, the stallion who mounts the world among the Dothraki. In each telling, a hero rises to battle darkness with a flaming sword, Lightbringer, forged through terrible sacrifice. The prophecy speaks of rebirth when the red star bleeds and the darkness gathers, leading many to seek a single fulfillment in their time. Yet what if this narrow interpretation misses the deeper truth? The Azor Ahai prophecy describes not a single hero's return, but a cyclical pattern woven into the very fabric of this world, a necessary response that arises whenever darkness threatens to consume all. Each generation must face its own long night, and each must forge its own Lightbringer through sacrifice. This pattern explains why so many characters partially fulfill the prophecy's requirements. They each represent different manifestations of the same archetypal response to existential threat. Consider the evidence scattered throughout ancient texts. In the libraries of the Citadel, fragmentary accounts speak of multiple long nights throughout history, not just one. The 5 forts in the far east of Essos, mirroring the wall in structure and purpose, suggest a darkness that has threatened humanity from multiple directions across vast timescales. Even the Valyrians, with their blood magic and dragon bond, might represent one civilization's attempt to forge their own metaphorical Lightbringer against some now forgotten darkness. This interpretation transforms our understanding of characters. Like Jon Snow, Daenerys Targaryen, and even Stannis Baratheon, none was the Azor Ahai reborn. Each was one facet of the eternal hero archetype responding to the darkness of their time. Jon's sacrifice of love and claim to the throne, Daenerys' birth of dragons from fire and death, Stannis' willingness to sacrifice what he held dear, all represent different aspects of the hero's journey, different approaches to forging Lightbringer. Most compelling is how this view recontextualizes the defeat of the Night King. Arya Stark, with no apparent connection to the prophecy, delivers the killing blow. Yet in the broader pattern, she represents exactly what the prophecy foretold, the unexpected savior arriving when the red star bleeds, the Stark banner flying over a castle bathed in the red glow of dragonfire to end the darkness. Her weapon, a giant Valyrian steel dagger meant to kill Bran, now used to save him, is her Lightbringer, forged through the sacrifice of her identity during her training with the Faceless Men. This cyclical interpretation also explains why the White Walkers return at all. They are not a singular threat, but a recurring one, arising whenever the world falls out of balance. Their defeat is never permanent because the forces they represent cold, death, the inevitable entropy that threatens all living things, can never be permanently vanquished, only temporarily pushed back by the fire of human courage and sacrifice. In this light, the true meaning of the prince that was promised becomes clear. Not a single savior, but a promise that darkness will always be met with light, that whenever winter comes, there will be those who stand against it, forging their lightbringer through whatever sacrifice their time demands. The song of ice and fire is not sung once, but continuously, with different voices taking up different parts of the eternal melody that holds the world in balance. Theory 5. The three-headed dragon's true meaning. The dragon must have 3 heads. This cryptic statement, uttered by Rhaegar Targaryen in Daenerys' vision at the House of the Undying, has long been interpreted as a reference to 3 dragon riders, 3 Targaryens who would unite to restore their dynasty. Yet this surface reading fails to capture the profound sacrificial pattern at the heart of Rhaegar's obsession, a pattern that would continue long after his death. What if the 3-headed dragon refers not to 3 people, but to 3 essential sacrifices, a tripartite death that gives birth to salvation? This interpretation reveals a dark symmetry spanning decades: Rhaegar's death at the Trident, Lyanna's death in childbirth, and finally, Jon's sacrifice of love by killing Daenerys. 3 deaths spread across a generation, each necessary to break the wheel of tyranny that had ground Westeros beneath it for centuries. Consider the evidence from Rhaegar's behavior. After reading an ancient text, he transformed from a scholarly prince into a warrior, saying, "I must be a fighter." This sudden change suggests he discovered not just that he needed to sire a promised prince, but that his own death was a necessary component of the prophecy's fulfillment. The ruby-red blood flowing into the trident was the first head of the dragon, the father's sacrifice. Lyanna's death in the Tower of Joy represents the second head, the mother's sacrifice, the bed of blood where she extracted her promise from. Ned was not merely a tragic consequence of childbirth, but an essential component of the magic that would ultimately protect Jon Snow. Her dying words, "Promise me, Ned," sealed a blood pact that would shield the child from Robert's wrath, allowing him to grow into the man who could complete the cycle. The third head of the dragon was fulfilled when Jon plunged his dagger into Daenerys' heart beneath the Iron Throne. This sacrifice of love, killing the woman he loved to protect the realm, completed the pattern begun by his parents. Father, mother, son, each giving up what they treasured most. This reading explains why Jon feels compelled toward this terrible act despite his nature. He was fulfilling a destiny written in the blood of his parents, the culmination of a prophecy 3 generations in the making. This interpretation also explains the significance of dragons in the equation. Daenerys' 3 dragons, Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion, each played a role in this sacrificial pattern. Viserion, killed and raised by the Night King, represented death perverted into unnatural life. Rhaegal, named for Jon's father and ridden briefly by Jon himself, died protecting the living. And Drogon, after witnessing Daenerys' death, melted the Iron Throne rather than killing Jon, recognizing the completion of the necessary sacrifice rather than perpetuating the cycle of violence. The 3-headed dragon was never about restoration of Targaryen power, but about its necessary end, the 3 sacrifices required to break the wheel that Daenerys herself spoke of destroying. Rhaegar's obsession was not with creating a triumvirate of dragon lords to rule the world, but with setting in motion the sacrificial cycle that would ultimately free the world from the tyranny his family had helped create. Theory 6. The Dreamer's Bloodline. Among the ancient abilities attributed to the Targaryens, none is more significant than the prophetic dreams that saved their house from the doom of Valyria. Dennis, the dreamer, foresaw the cataclysm 12 years before it occurred, allowing her father Enar to relocate their family to Dragonstone, making the Targaryens the only Dragonlord family to survive. This gift of prophetic dreaming appeared sporadically throughout Targaryen history, in Daeron the Drunken, in Daemon the Sioux Blackfire, and most significantly in the dragon dreams of Daenerys herself. Yet the most powerful green seer in the known world bears no Targaryen name, Bran Stark, whose abilities far surpass mere prophetic dreaming to include skin-changing, accessing the weirwood network, and eventually becoming the three-eyed raven. What if this seemingly Stark-exclusive power actually stems from hidden Targaryen blood introduced into the Stark line through an ancient forgotten union? The evidence lies in the peculiar intensity of Bran's abilities compared to other known green seers. While the Children of the Forest and even Jojen Reed possessed forms of green sight, none could match Bran's power to not only see the past, but interact with it, as demonstrated when he called out to young Ned at the Tower of Joy and was heard. This unprecedented ability suggests a unique confluence of magical bloodlines, the ice magic of the First Men through House Stark, combined with the fire magic of old Valyria through some undocumented Targaryen connection. Historical records provide tantalizing gaps where such a union might have occurred. During Aegon V's reign, his daughter Rhaelle was formally betrothed to a Baratheon to heal rifts after the Blackfire Rebellion. But Targaryen history includes several lost princess stories, daughters sent to distant houses for political alliances that received less documentation. Could one such princess have been sent north, perhaps during the time of Balon the Brave, when relations between North and Crown needed reinforcement? Alternatively, the connection might be far older and more mysterious. Aegon the Conqueror, notably, avoided confronting the North in battle, instead accepting Torrhen Stark's fealty with terms more favorable than offered to other kingdoms. Some Meisters speculate this unusual restraint stemmed from a shared ancient bloodline or prophecy known to both houses, perhaps dating back to the legendary figure of Brandon the Builder, who raised both Winterfell and, some tales suggest, the foundations of Dragonstone with the same magic. This hidden Targaryen blood would explain why Bran, among all his siblings, developed such powerful abilities. He inherited the strongest combination of both bloodlines. It explains why he could see Jon's true parentage when even the three-eyed raven before him, Brynden Rivers, himself a Targaryen bastard, had not revealed this truth. Most significantly, it explains Bran's ultimate ascension to rule the Six Kingdoms. He represented the perfect balance of ice and fire, Stark and Targaryen, a union of magical bloodlines that could heal a land torn apart by their previous conflicts. The implications extend beyond Bran himself. If House Stark carries dormant Targaryen blood, then Jon Snow is not the only character with a claim to both bloodlines. All the Stark children potentially carry this dual heritage, explaining their various magical affinities. Arya's facility, with faceless men magic, Rickon's wild dreams, and even Sansa's occasional prophetic nightmares described in the books. The wolves and the dragons have been one blood all along, separated by time and geography, but united in the generation that would face the long night. Theory 7. The Blackfire's Hidden Victory. For nearly a century, the Blackfire rebellions tore the Seven Kingdoms apart as the legitimized bastard line of Aegon IV fought to claim the Iron Throne from their true-born Targaryen cousins. History records their ultimate defeat, the male line extinguished when Sir Barristan Selmy slew Maelys, the monstrous, the last of the Blackfire pretenders. Yet what if the Blackfires achieved their ultimate victory not through battle, but through infiltration, their blood secretly continuing in one of the most unlikely houses? Lannister. The evidence begins with Tyrion Lannister himself. His mismatched eyes, one green, one black in the books, his dreams of dragons, and his uncanny affinity for the beasts when he unchains Viserion and Rhaegal beneath Meereen. These characteristics suggest Valyrian blood, yet Tyrion is ostensibly pure Lannister. The explanation may lie with his mother, Joanna Lannister, and her time at King's Landing. Joanna served as lady-in-waiting to Rhaella Targaryen before her marriage to Tywin. During this period, she moved in court circles where descendants of Aegon IV's many bastards still operated, some openly acknowledged, others hidden in plain sight among noble houses. The timing of Joanna's departure from court coincides with historical gaps in the documented activities of Serra of Lys, a courtesan widely rumored to carry Blackfire blood through the female line. What if Joanna herself descended from a female Blackfire line, perhaps through her mother, a bloodline kept secret to protect her from the persecution that male Blackfires faced? This would explain Tywin's outsized rage at Tyrion's birth. Beyond the tragedy of Joanna's death and Tyrion's dwarfism, Tywin may have seen features that revealed the truth he had long suspected but never confirmed, that his wife carried the blood of House Targaryen's greatest enemies. This theory gains strength when considering the strategic implications. By the time of Robert's rebellion, the Blackfires had learned the futility of direct confrontation. Instead, they adopted a subtler approach, placing their descendants in positions of influence within their enemies' strongholds. Tyrion's rise to Hand of the Queen represents the ultimate fulfillment of this strategy, a Blackfire descendant becoming the most trusted advisor to the last Targaryen, guiding her decisions and ultimately helping shape the fate of Westeros. The irony is exquisite. While Varys and Illyrio schemed to place their purported Blackfire candidate, young Griff Aegon, on the throne through elaborate deception, the true Blackfire victory was unfolding through Tyrion, a man who never knew his own heritage yet embodied the cunning and resilience that defined the Blackfire legacy. His counsel to Daenerys, his brief tenure as hand to Joffrey, and finally his role in selecting Bran as king all represent the Blackfire line shaping the destiny of Westeros from within. Even Tyrion's famous wit and intelligence reflect the intellectual brilliance of Daemon II Blackfire, who was known more for his dreams and scholarly pursuits than martial prowess. The dragon dreams that occasionally plague Tyrion in the books mirror those experienced by known Targaryen descendants, suggesting a blood connection that transcends his Lannister appearance. Perhaps most telling is Tyrion's survival against all odds, escaping execution multiple times, surviving battles, disease, and the fall of cities. This extraordinary luck mirrors the Targaryen Blackfire trait of being hard to kill, a resilience born of dragon blood that allows them to endure where others would perish. In Tyrion's ultimate rise to become hand to King Bran, we witness the final, subtle victory of the Blackfire line, not claiming the throne directly, but guiding the hand that rules. Theory 8. The Dragon Seed's Return. During the Dance of the Dragons, the devastating Targaryen civil war, a desperate Princess Rhaenyra found herself with more dragons than riders. In a bold move, she issued a proclamation offering wealth and titles to any bastards of Targaryen descent, known as dragon seeds, who could successfully claim a dragon. Against all expectations, several commoners from Dragonstone and the surrounding areas succeeded, proving their dragon blood through their bond with these fearsome creatures. This historical episode reveals a profound truth often overlooked in discussions of Targaryen exceptionalism. Their blood flows far more widely through Westeros than officially acknowledged. The Dragon Seeds program scattered Targaryen bastards throughout the realm, creating hidden pockets of dragon blood in the most unexpected places. This theory posits that many noble houses unknowingly carry this heritage, explaining why certain characters throughout the saga display inexplicable courage, madness, or affinity for fire that mirrors Targaryen traits. Consider House Baratheon, whose founder Orys was widely rumored to be Aegon, the Conqueror's bastard half-brother. This acknowledged connection explains the fury that characterizes the line. Robert's battlefield rage, Stannis' unyielding determination, Renly's charismatic leadership. But other houses show similar, unexpected traits. House Dane's unusual, violet eyes, and the legendary sword Dawn, with properties suspiciously similar to Valyrian steel, suggest ancient Valyrian connection. The Hightower's obsession with mystical knowledge and their tower that predates recorded history hint at connections to old Valyria. More intriguingly, the scattered dragon seeds likely spread throughout the small folk population, explaining seeming anomalies like Gendry's inexplicable stamina and crafting abilities, beyond what would be expected even of a blacksmith's apprentice, or the strange resilience of characters like Hot Pie, who survive situations that claim far more capable fighters. These aren't merely storytelling conveniences, but subtle indicators of the diluted dragon blood that runs through much of Westeros. This widespread distribution of Targaryen blood explains several key mysteries in the narrative. First, it clarifies why dragons, after their extinction, returned specifically when Daenerys entered the fire with her eggs. The necessary concentration of dragon blood, absent for generations, was finally present again in her pure Targaryen lineage. Second, it explains the sporadic appearance of prophetic dreams and fire resistance in non-Targaryen characters throughout Westerosi history, diluted manifestations of dragon blood traits. Most significantly, this theory recontextualizes the political struggles of Westeros. The Dance of the Dragons was not merely a civil war, but the last great flowering of dragon blood across the population, creating a generation with heightened magical potential just before the dragons themselves began to dwindle. The subsequent blackening of the Targaryen line through marriage with other houses was not dilution, but reconnection. Dragon blood calling to dragon blood across the realm, unconsciously seeking to maintain the magical bloodline, even as the dragons themselves faded. The implications for the saga's conclusion are profound. When Drogon carries Daenerys' body away after her death, he flies east, possibly toward Valyria or other lands where scattered descendants of dragon lords might still dwell. The dragons may not be gone forever, but waiting for the right combination of bloodlines to reawaken their bond with humanity. The dragon seeds, scattered throughout Westeros and Essos, represent a magical heritage that remains dormant rather than destroyed, waiting for the right circumstances to flourish once more. Theory 9. The broken chain of loyalty. When Lord Commander Jorah Mormont presented Jon Snow with the ancestral Valyrian steel sword of House Mormont Longclaw, he claimed to have replaced the bare pommel with a wolf in honor of House Stark. This seemingly straightforward gesture of respect conceals a far deeper significance. Jorah Mormont knew Jon Snow's true parentage and deliberately chose him as his successor, guided by ancient Night's Watch knowledge preserved through generations of Lord Commanders. The evidence begins with the unusual circumstances of the gift itself. Valyrian steel swords are priceless family heirlooms, virtually never given outside the bloodline. Jeor had already designated his own heir by sending Longclaw to his son Jorah, only reclaiming it when Jorah disgraced the family. Why not simply hold it in trust for a future worthy Mormont? The answer lies in the Night's Watch's secret purpose and the identity of its 998th Lord Commander. The Night's Watch was founded not merely to defend against wildlings, but to prepare for the Long Night's return. This knowledge, while dimmed over millennia, was preserved in the Order's most closely guarded records. Records accessible only to the Lord Commander and the Maester of Castle Black. Significantly, during Jon's time, this position was held by Maester Aemon, a hidden Targaryen who had rejected the crown for service. Aemon Targaryen lived at Castle Black for decades, corresponding regularly with his family until their downfall. Given his position, he would have been informed of Rhaegar's actions, including his secret marriage to Lyanna Stark and the birth of their son. When that son, under the name Jon Snow, arrived at Castle Black, Aemon would have recognized the significance. Immediately, the union of ice, Stark and fire, Targaryen bloodlines in one person, fulfilling ancient prophecies recorded in Night's Watch archives. Aemon would have shared this knowledge with Jeor Mormont, explaining the Lord Commander's special interest in Jon from the beginning. Mormont's decision to make Jon his steward, traditionally the position from which future Lord Commanders are chosen, was no coincidence, but the first step in a carefully orchestrated succession plan. Longclaw was not merely a reward for saving Mormont's life, but a symbolic passing of authority to the prince who was promised. This theory explains several otherwise puzzling elements of Jon's rapid rise in the Night's Watch. His election as Lord Commander at such a young age, while ostensibly the result of Sam's political maneuvering, was possible only because key senior members had been subtly prepared to accept him. Mormont's ranging beyond the Wall conveniently removed many who might have opposed Jon's ascension. Even Jon's assassination and resurrection serve the pattern. Ancient texts speak of Azor Ahai being reborn, a prophecy literally fulfilled when Jon returns from death. The broken chain of loyalty refers not to any betrayal, but to the breaking of the Night's Watch's ostensible chain of command in service to its true, original purpose. Mormont, Aemon, and likely several senior brothers before them, had preserved the knowledge that when winter finally came, the Watch would need a leader with the blood of the first men and old Valyria combined, exactly what Jon Snow represented. This interpretation reframes Jon's entire Watch experience. His training, his ranging beyond the Wall, his time among the wildlings, all were not random events, but carefully guided experiences preparing him for his role in the coming conflict. Even his death and resurrection served this greater purpose, marking him unquestionably as the prophesied leader and freeing him from his vows through the technicality of death, allowing him to leave Castle Black when the time came to unite the North against the dead. Longclaw itself takes on greater significance in this light, not merely a weapon, but a symbol of legitimacy, deliberately given to mark Jon as the rightful leader against the Long Night. The sword's history, its white wolf pommel, and its Valyrian steel blade capable of killing White Walkers all point to its intended purpose, arming the prince who was promised for the War for Dawn. Theory 10. The Dragon Queen's first crown. In the dusty halls of Meereen, a pivotal moment in Westerosi history occurred when Daenerys Targaryen rejected Prince Quentyn Martell's marriage proposal. This seemingly minor diplomatic failure, barely noted amid the spectacle of dragons and slave rebellions, represents one of the saga's greatest what-if moments, a crossroads where the destiny of the Seven Kingdoms hung in the balance. Had Daenerys accepted Quentyn's hand, she would have gained what she most desperately needed, a peaceful path to Westeros. Dorne, unlike any other kingdom, had successfully resisted Targaryen conquest for generations before ultimately joining through marriage alliance. This historical precedent made the Martells uniquely positioned to understand how to integrate a powerful outsider into the existing power structure of Westeros without destructive conflict. With Dornish support, Daenerys could have landed in a friendly territory with established supply lines, local knowledge, and political legitimacy. The Martells' historical grievances against the Lannisters would have provided ready-made alliances with other houses opposed to Cersei's rule. Most critically, this approach would have avoided the disastrous alliance with Euron Greyjoy, whose ambush cost Daenerys two of her closest advisors and stoked her growing paranoia. Beyond these strategic advantages lies a more profound possibility. A Martell alliance might have prevented Daenerys' descent into madness. The isolation she experienced in Westeros, surrounded by advisors who didn't truly know her and Northerners who refused to accept her, contributed significantly to her mental deterioration. In contrast, the Dornish, with their more accepting attitude toward female rulers and foreign customs, might have provided the cultural bridge she needed to adjust to Westerosi society without feeling so utterly alien. Quentyn's proposal offered not just marriage, but cultural integration. Dorne's history of Rhoynar influence meant they understood how to blend different traditions successfully, precisely what Daenerys, with her Westerosi experiences, required. The Dornish acceptance of bastards and more progressive attitudes toward women would have aligned with her own instincts for social reform without requiring fire and blood to implement. Most significantly, this path would have given Daenerys something she desperately needed: time. Rather than rushing to attack King's Landing, a Dornish alliance would have allowed her to establish herself gradually, winning small folk support through demonstrated good governance rather than terror. The Dornish approach to warfare, patient, strategic, poison over open battle, might have influenced her to pursue Cersei's removal through targeted means rather than mass destruction. The tragedy of Quentyn's burned body in Meereen thus represents more than one prince's failed ambition. It symbolizes the closing of the door on Daenerys' potential for peaceful integration into Westeros. Without this bridge between cultures, she fell back on the only approach she knew from Essos: conquest through overwhelming force. Her first crown might have been that of a Dornish princess, beloved by her adopted people, rather than the blood-soaked title of Queen of the Ashes that she ultimately earned. In this light, Quentyn Martell's death becomes one of the saga's great fulcrum points, a moment when fire chose destruction over union, when the last Targaryen rejected the hand of peace and embraced the dragon's way of fire and blood, setting her inexorably on the path that would end beneath the melted Iron Throne. Theory 11. The Rose's Thorns. Behind the beauty and charm of House Tyrell lay one of the saga's most ruthless political operators, Olenna, the Queen of Thorns. Her confession to poisoning Joffrey revealed only the surface of a far deeper, more intricate scheme, a masterwork of political manipulation that used the faith militant as an unwitting weapon to destroy her enemies and clear the path for Tyrell dominance. This theory posits that Olenna orchestrated not just Joffrey's assassination, but also the rise of the faith militant, deliberately manipulating Cersei's paranoia about Margaery to create the conditions for religious authority to flourish in King's Landing. The ultimate goal, to install a ruler whose strings would be pulled by the High Septon, a man chosen and controlled by Tyrell influence. The evidence begins with the curious timing of the faith's resurgence. Shortly after the Tyrells arrive in King's Landing in force, religious fervor suddenly grips the capital. This is no coincidence, but the result of careful Tyrell patronage of the faith, channeled through their traditional role as protectors of the Reach's abundant harvests and religious centers. The seemingly spontaneous appearance of the Sparrows coincides perfectly with Tyrell grain shipments to the capital, suggesting these religious zealots traveled with Tyrell supply caravans, not as official representatives, but with tacit permission. Olenna's manipulation of Cersei represents the scheme's masterstroke, recognizing Cersei's paranoia about younger, more beautiful queens. Olenna deliberately heightened tensions between Cersei and Margaery, knowing this would drive Cersei to increasingly desperate measures. When Cersei restored the Faith militant to counter Tyrell influence, she played directly into Olenna's hands, creating a third power in King's Landing that could be turned against the Lannisters when the time was right. The selection of the High Sparrow himself bears the hallmarks of Tyrell influence. His background remains conveniently mysterious, but his focus on the sins of the nobility while ignoring Tyrell excesses suggests a carefully chosen instrument. The Faith's traditional center in Old Town, Tyrell territory, provided ample opportunity for Olenna to identify and elevate a suitable candidate, one whose genuine religious fervor made him appear independent while his actions consistently undermined Lannister power. Even the Faith's persecution of Loras follows this pattern. While seemingly a blow to House Tyrell, it actually served Olenna's strategy by making the Faith appear impartial while removing Loras from the game, protecting him from the coming conflict and preserving him as a future Tyrell heir once the dust settled. Margaery's skillful handling of her own arrest, contrasted with Cersei's humiliation, further demonstrates the Tyrell hand guiding events. The wildfire explosion that destroyed the Sept of Baelor wasn't just Cersei's desperate countermove. It was the only path available to her after being thoroughly outmaneuvered by Olenna's strategy. The Queen of Thorns had created a situation where either outcome served Tyrell interests. Either the Faith would convict Cersei, removing her from power, or Cersei would be forced to such extremes that she would destroy her own legitimacy in the eyes of the realm. While the Sept's destruction claimed Margaery and Loras, Olenna herself survived, free to seek new alliances with Daenerys Targaryen. Even in apparent defeat, her strategy continued. By allying House Tyrell with the Dragon Queen, she ensured that regardless of who sat the Iron Throne, the Reach's influence would remain. The rose's thorns were always longest and sharpest when they appeared most delicate, and in Olenna's grand design, even apparent failures advanced her house's position in ways her enemies never suspected until it was too late. Theory 12. The Faceless Men's Greatest Victory. The Doom still rules in Valyria. These ominous words from the kindly man in the House of Black and White hint at one of the greatest mysteries in the known world. What caused the doom of Valyria, the cataclysmic event that destroyed the greatest civilization in history in a single day? While commonly attributed to natural disaster, the eruption of the 14 flames, a more sinister explanation lurks beneath the surface. The doom was the Faceless Men's greatest assassination contract, the death of an entire civilization. The evidence begins with the Faceless Men's origin. Founded by slaves in the volcanic mines beneath Valyria, the first faceless man gave the gift of death to suffering slaves before eventually turning his skills against the masters. The Order's foundation myth makes their motive clear: vengeance against the dragon lords who built their empire on the broken backs of countless slaves. What greater vengeance than to destroy that empire entirely? Technically, such destruction was within their capabilities. Septon Barth, one of the most learned men in Westerosi history, wrote that the Valyrians used magic to control the 14 flames, preventing natural eruptions through the efforts of fire mages whose spells maintained the balance of the volatile forces beneath their peninsula. The Faceless Men, masters of infiltration, could have systematically assassinated these mages, removing the magical safeguards that kept the 14 flames in check. The timing supports this theory. The century before the doom saw increasing slave revolts throughout the Valyrian freehold, suggesting growing organization among the oppressed populations. These revolts may have been orchestrated diversions, drawing attention away from the real threat. the silent killers moving among the fire mages, delivering the gift of death one by one until the critical threshold was crossed and no one remained. Who could contain the 14 Flames' fury? Most tellingly, the only Dragonlord family to survive, House Targaryen, had relocated to Dragonstone years earlier due to Daenerys' prophetic dream. If the doom were purely natural, such precise foreknowledge would be nearly impossible. But if it were a planned operation by the Faceless Men, word of the plot might have leaked to certain slaves in the Targaryen household who could have fabricated or influenced Daenerys' dream to save the one Dragonlord family known for treating their slaves with relative kindness. The aftermath further supports this theory. After the doom, the Faceless Men established their headquarters in Braavos, the secret city founded by escaped slaves. Their temple to the many-faced god houses the faces of death from countless cultures, symbolizing their view that all gods are aspects of death. What greater temple to death could exist than the smoking ruins of Valyria itself, where they delivered their gift to an entire civilization? This interpretation recontextualizes the Faceless Men's entire philosophy. Their insistence that death is a gift and that all men must die takes on new meaning when viewed through the lens of the doom, the ultimate gift to the many-faced god, the death of the world's greatest empire in a single day. Their subsequent activities, selling death to those who can afford their exorbitant prices, serve as both cover and funding for their true purpose, maintaining the doom's hold on Valyria, preventing any attempt to rebuild what they so carefully destroyed. When Arya Stark learns their arts, she unwittingly touches this deeper history, the techniques developed not merely for individual assassination, but for the systematic destruction of an entire magical system. Her eventual rejection of complete facelessness represents a rejection of this absolute death, choosing instead selective justice over wholesale destruction. In this light, the Faceless Men become not merely a guild of assassins, but the architects of history's greatest act of revolutionary vengeance, the death of Valyria itself, the gift that freed thousands of slaves and forever changed the face of the known world. Theory 13, the Dragonlord's Final Gambit. As the 14 Flames erupted and the doom descended upon Valyria, the Dragonlords, masters of the world's most powerful blood magic, did not simply accept their fate. In a desperate final gambit, some attempted to escape death by transferring their consciousness into their dragons using forbidden blood magic rituals, explaining why certain dragons throughout history displayed unusual intelligence and behavior that transcended mere animal instinct. This theory finds its foundation in the mysterious fate of Balerion, the Black Dread, after his unexplained journey to the ruins of Valyria. When Princess Arya Targaryen disappeared with Balerion for more than a year, their eventual return brought horror. The princess dying from what Septon Bath described as things that had been living inside her, while Balerion himself returned, with fresh wounds that even he, the most powerful dragon in the world, could not prevent. Something in Valyria had changed the great dragon fundamentally. What if Balerion encountered the dragons that still roamed the smoking ruins, dragons no longer purely beasts, but vessels containing the consciousness of ancient dragonlords who had transferred their minds as Valyria fell? These Dragonlord hybrids would represent the most dangerous form of the already formidable creatures. Dragons with human intelligence, memory, and magical knowledge, potentially even the ability to communicate with or influence other dragons. Through some form of telepathic bond, this explains several anomalies in the behavior of dragons throughout Targaryen history. Balerion's unusually close bond with Aegon the Conqueror suggests more than animal loyalty, perhaps recognition of shared Valyrian blood that connected them on a deeper level than other dragon rider pairs. Vermithor, who accepted Jaehaerys as Ryder immediately, despite the young king's inexperience, displayed a wisdom beyond normal animal intelligence, seemingly evaluating the character of his rider rather than responding to dominance or training. Most tellingly, the gradual decline and eventual extinction of dragons coincides with what this theory would predict. The human consciousness trapped in dragon bodies could not sustain itself indefinitely. With each generation, the dragons born in captivity were more bestial, less intelligent, as the human elements faded from their bloodline. The final dragons, described as stunted and deformed, represented the last remnants of this magical hybrid, their physical deterioration mirroring the deterioration of the human consciousness that once guided their ancestors. This theory also explains why Daenerys's dragons, hatched from eggs that had turned to stone, preserving their original essence, displayed greater intelligence and growth than the last generations of Targaryen dragons. They represented a return to the purer form, free from the degenerative effects of the human-dragon hybridization that had slowly destroyed the species. The implications of this theory reach even to the saga's conclusion. Drogon's decision to melt the Iron Throne rather than kill Jon after Daenerys' death suggests not just animal intelligence, but a deeper understanding of symbolism and causality, the comprehension that the throne itself, not Jon, was the true source of the destruction. This level of abstract thinking would be impossible for a mere animal, but makes perfect sense if dragons retain some element of human consciousness from their Valyrian creators. When Drogon carries Daenerys' body east after her death, he may be returning not just to Dragonlands, but to the ancient home of the consciousness that partially inhabits him, seeking the ruins of Valyria, where the last remnants of the Dragon Lords still exist in their transformed state, waiting to welcome the last Targaryen to the place where magic and human consciousness first merged with dragonkind in a desperate attempt to cheat the doom that consumed their civilization. Theory 14. The Children's Regret. In one of the saga's most shocking revelations, we learn that the White Walkers were not natural enemies of mankind, but creations of the children of the forest, magical weapons designed to combat the First Men during their war for Westeros. This origin raises profound questions. How did such a defensive measure transform into an existential threat to all life? The answer may lie not in magical failure, but in tragic misunderstanding. The Night King was originally a volunteer who sacrificed himself to create peace between the species before something went catastrophically wrong. The evidence begins with the ritual itself, shown in Bran's vision. The man who becomes the Night King is bound, but shows no resistance. Unlike a prisoner facing execution, he appears resigned or even willing. His eyes meet Leaf's before she plunges the dragonglass into his heart, suggesting communication or understanding rather than enmity. This visual clue hints at a more complex arrangement than simple weaponization of a human captive. What if, after years of devastating warfare, representatives of both First Men and children recognized the need for intervention? The man who became the Night King may have been a respected elder or leader among the First Men who volunteered for transformation, understanding that becoming something neither fully human nor fully child might create a bridge between the warring peoples, a living embodiment of peace through shared sacrifice. The children's magic, however, was flawed. In attempting to create a being of both ice and fire, combining their nature magic with human life force, they inadvertently created something that transcended both, a force of pure death that saw all life as the enemy. The dragonglass that should have balanced the magical energies instead created a third, unanticipated nature, the cold that extinguishes both the flame of human passion and the green fire of the children's magic. This explains Leaf's haunted explanation to Bran, We were at war. We were being slaughtered. Her tone carries not just justification, but profound regret, the sorrow of someone who participated in a well-intentioned act that produced catastrophic consequences. The children had not merely created a weapon that turned against them. They had betrayed the trust of someone who sacrificed everything to end the war, transforming him into the very embodiment of the destruction he sought to prevent. The pact between first men and children, established shortly after the creation of the White Walkers, takes on new significance in this light. Rather than a simple peace treaty, it represents the desperate attempt of both races to contain their shared mistake, the children agreeing to help manage the threat they created, the first men acknowledging their role in necessitating such desperate measures in the first place. The construction of the wall, traditionally attributed to Brandon the Builder, likely involved children's magic precisely because they felt responsible for creating the threat it was designed to contain. This interpretation transforms our understanding of the Night King's motivations. His march south represents not random destruction, but a specific vengeance against those who betrayed his sacrifice, seeking to transform all living beings into versions of himself, eternal but empty, powerful but purposeless. His fixation on Bran as the three-eyed raven stems from Bran's connection to the children who performed the original ritual, the last representative of those who turned his noble sacrifice into eternal torment. The children's extinction by the time of the main saga takes on tragic irony, the last of them dying to protect Bran from the very threat they created, their regret finally finding expression in this final sacrifice. In their last stand in the cave beneath the weirwood, they faced not just an enemy, but their greatest mistake, the living embodiment of their most profound regret. Theory 15. The Ice Dragon's Heart. Deep beneath the lands of Always Winter lies the saga's greatest unseen power, an ancient ice dragon bound to the Night King's soul and the true source of his seemingly limitless power over cold and death. This creature, mentioned in old Nan's tales but never directly encountered, explains the Night King's abilities, his purpose, and his inexorable march southward toward warmer lands. The evidence begins with the Night King's symbol, the spiral, pattern seen repeatedly in White Walker arrangements and cave drawings. This pattern matches descriptions in ancient texts of the magical binding used by the children of the forest when containing powerful magical entities. When they created the Night King by plunging dragonglass into a first man's heart, they weren't merely transforming a human, but binding him to an already existing magical force, an ice dragon, captured and imprisoned beneath the frozen north. The children's desperation in their war against the First Men led them to attempt controlling this ancient creature, one of the legendary ice dragons said to be made of living ice, with breath of cold rather than fire. Unable to directly command such a powerful being, they instead created the Night King as an intermediary, a magical conduit through which they could direct the dragon's power against their enemies. But the binding ritual created an unexpected outcome. Rather than the children controlling both the Night King and the dragon, the Night King and dragon developed a shared consciousness, independent of their creator's intentions. This connection explains the Night King's seemingly impossible powers. His ability to raise the dead stems not from his own magic, but from the ice dragon's ancient connection to the deepest cold, the cold of the void between stars, where death is absolute. His immunity to fire, demonstrated when he walks unharmed. Through Dragonflame comes from the ice dragon's nature as fire's opposite and equal. Even his ability to transform Craster's sons into new White Walkers represents the ice dragon's power to reproduce its essence through extreme cold. Most tellingly, this theory explains the Night King's single-minded march south. The dragon, bound, beneath ice for thousands of years, yearns to return to the warmer lands where legends say ice dragons were born, not in the northern wastes, but in the heart of winter itself, a metaphysical cold that once existed throughout the world before fire gained dominance. The Night King's goal was never simply destruction, but liberation, breaking the magical bindings that held the ice dragon beneath the earth, allowing it to reclaim the skies and restore the primordial balance between fire and ice. This connection to an ice dragon explains why killing the Night King destroyed all White Walkers and Whites simultaneously. The magic animating them flowed not from the Night King himself, but through him from the bound dragon. When Arya's Valyrian steel dagger, forged in the fires of the dragon's ancient enemy, struck the Night King, it severed the magical connection between him and the ice dragon, cutting off the power source that maintained his entire army. The true tragedy of this interpretation lies in its cyclical nature. The ice dragon remains beneath the land of always winter, temporarily dormant without its human connection, but not destroyed. The magical bindings created by the children of the forest weakened with their extinction, meaning that in some future generation, when the memory of the last long night has again faded to legend, the ice dragon may find a new human connection and rise once more, bringing winter, death, and the long night in an eternal cycle that reflects the necessary balance between fire and ice, life and death, that maintains the world's magical equilibrium. Theory 16. The rain's final revenge. "And who are you," the proud lord said, "that I must bow so low?" The haunting lyrics of The Rains of Castamere commemorate Tywin Lannister's most brutal triumph, the complete annihilation of House Rain after their failed rebellion. History records that no Rain survived Tywin's vengeance, their ancestral seat flooded with all inhabitants trapped inside. Yet what if this victory was incomplete? What if certain branches of House Rain had anticipated Tywin's ruthlessness and planted the seeds of a multi-generational revenge plot that would ultimately destroy House Lannister from within? The evidence begins with the suspicious timing of House Lannister's decline. For decades after the Rain-Tarbeck rebellion, Tywin's rule seemed unassailable, his family's power only growing. Yet within a single generation after his death, House Lannister collapsed spectacularly, Tywin murdered by his son, Cersei's children dead, Jaime's military career ended, and the family legacy in ruins. Such comprehensive destruction suggests more than bad luck. It points to deliberate orchestration. This theory posits that a cadet branch of House Rain, perhaps cousins or nephews of the main line, survived by serving other houses as Maesters and Septons, positions that offered both anonymity and influence. These surviving Rains, bearing names of the Faith or the Citadel rather than their blood house, dedicated themselves to a single purpose, ensuring Tywin Lannister would live to see his legacy crumble, his house fall, and his name fade. The Maesters of Westeros hold extraordinary influence, controlling communication between houses and advising lords on all matters of importance. A Rain survivor serving as Maester could subtly shape events through selectively delayed messages, carefully worded counsel, or even targeted medical treatments. Similarly, Septons guide the moral and spiritual understanding of both small folk and nobility, shaping public perception in ways that might not be immediately obvious, but prove devastating over time. Specific events support this conspiracy. Grand Maester Pycelle's unwavering loyalty to House Lannister seems suspicious unless he was deliberately giving advice that appeared sound but contained subtle flaws, guiding Tywin's children toward increasingly destructive decisions while maintaining a facade of loyalty. The Faith militant's sudden resurgence and specific targeting of Cersei bears the hallmarks of long-planned revenge rather than spontaneous religious fervor. Most tellingly, consider the name Rain itself. phonetically identical to rain in The Rains of Castamere. This wordplay takes on sinister significance when we recall the rain sigil, a red lion on silver, the colours reversed from Lannister's gold lion on crimson. The surviving rains essentially became invisible reflections of House Lannister, mirroring their positions of influence while working toward their destruction. The culmination of this revenge appears in Cersei's destruction of the Sept of Baelor. While seemingly a triumph for Cersei, this act guaranteed House Lannister's ultimate fall by alienating both the Faith and the Tyrells, destroying what little legitimate authority remained to her rule. If a Rain agent had infiltrated the Faith's hierarchy, such an outcome represents the perfect revenge. Tywin's daughter destroying herself through her own worst impulses, carefully nurtured by decades of subtle manipulation. Even the climactic sack of King's Landing by Daenerys potentially bears the mark of Rhaene influence. Ancient texts in the Citadel warn of dragonfire igniting caches of wildfire, information a maester of Rain descent might have deliberately withheld, knowing the devastating chain reaction that would follow and complete the destruction of the city Tywin had worked so hard to control. The final irony of this theory lies in its secrecy. The surviving Rains would never claim credit for their vengeance, understanding that their house's true victory lay in being forgotten while House Lannister's fall became legendary. The proud Lion would never know that the Red Lion had survived to orchestrate its downfall, a revenge served so cold that even Tywin Lannister, master of political maneuvering, never saw it coming until his dying breath in the Tower of the Hand. Theory 17. The Gardener King's Green Gift. Before Aegon's conquest, House Gardener ruled the Reach for thousands of years, claiming descent from Garth Greenhand, a legendary figure with mysterious connections to the land's fertility. When thus Gardener King and all his sons perished on the Field of Fire, history records their line as extinguished, their stewards House Tyrell rising to claim their seat at Highgarden. Yet the extraordinary continued prosperity of the Reach under Tyrell rule suggests a more complex truth. The Gardener King's magical bloodline, their green gift, survived, passing secretly into House Tyrell through carefully arranged marriages. The evidence begins with the remarkable fertility of the Reach, even during harsh winters. While other kingdoms struggle with famine during long winters, the Reach consistently produces enough surplus to feed much of Westeros. This agricultural miracle exceeds what can be explained by climate and soil alone, suggesting some subtle magic remains at work, the lingering influence of the Gardener bloodline's connection to the land itself. This theory posits that after the Field of Fire, surviving female members of House Gardener, princesses and cousins not present in the battle, were quietly integrated into House Tyrell through marriages, bringing their green gift into the new ruling house without drawing attention from the conquering Targaryens. The Tyrells, understanding the true source of the Reach's prosperity, maintained these bloodlines carefully across generations, preserving the magical connection between rulers and land that had sustained the kingdom since the Dawn Age. The physical manifestation of this magic appears in Highgarden itself, described as impossibly lush, with flowers blooming even in winter. The castle's famous briar labyrinth grows with unnatural vigor, as if responding to some unseen influence. Most tellingly, House Tyrell's unprecedented rise from stewards to high lords, and eventually to the Iron Throne itself through Margaery's marriages, suggests power beyond mere political acumen, the subtle influence of old magic helping their ascent. Olenna Tyrell's extraordinary longevity and mental acuity into advanced age hints at this magical heritage. Known as the Queen of Thorns, her very nickname evokes the plant magic associated with House Gardener. Her exceptional political instincts might represent more than experience, perhaps an inherited ability to sense the growth patterns of political situations. analogous to her ancestors' gift for understanding plant growth. Margaery's unusual ability to charm virtually everyone she meets, from hardened warriors to suspicious small folk, similarly suggests more than learned charisma. In the books, multiple characters comment on feeling inexplicably drawn to her, as if she radiates some compelling force. This magnetic presence echoes descriptions of Garth Greenhand himself, who legend says could make barren women fertile with a touch, a mythologized version of the Gardener bloodline's subtle influence over living things. This theory explains why the Tyrells were so determined to maintain control of Highgarden specifically, rather than seeking power elsewhere. Their magic was literally rooted in that land, drawing strength from the ancient godswood and the rich soil where countless Gardener kings were buried. When fighting the Lannisters, their strategy always prioritized protecting the Reach itself, over gaining ground elsewhere, not merely economic calculation, but magical necessity. The ultimate tragedy of House Tyrell's fall comes into focus through this lens. Cersei's destruction of the Tyrell heirs and Highgarden's subsequent sacking by Lannister forces represents not just political defeat, but the potential breaking of an ancient magical bloodline that had sustained the Reach's abundance for thousands of years. The future implications for Westeros are grave. Without the green gift flowing through its ruling house, the Reach's legendary fertility may gradually fade, leading to famine throughout the Seven Kingdoms during the winter that follows the saga's conclusion. The last remnant of this magic may survive in an unexpected place: Samwell Tarly. His mother was born of Florent, another house with ancient roots in the Reach and potential connections to the original Gardener bloodline. Sam's unexpected survival, against impossible odds, from the frozen wastes beyond the Wall to the infected halls of the Citadel, might reflect more than luck, suggesting the green gift's life-preserving aspects manifest in him, waiting to be passed to future generations. When the Reach most needs renewal. Theory 18. The Dreamer's Burden. Daenerys. Targaryen's visions in the House of the Undying represent one of the saga's most enigmatic sequences, filled with prophetic imagery that foreshadowed events to come. Yet what if these weren't merely glimpses of the future, but something far more haunting? Memories from a future Daenerys, trapped in an eternal loop, desperately trying to warn her past self about the tragedy awaiting her. This theory posits that Daenerys' final Dracarys command, the order to burn King's Landing, created a fracture in time itself, trapping her consciousness in a loop where she repeatedly experiences her rise and fall, each cycle attempting to communicate with her past self through magical nexus points like the House of the Undying, trying to prevent her tragic end, but always failing. The evidence begins with the strange, non-linear nature of the visions themselves. Daenerys sees the throne room destroyed and covered in snow, exactly as she would find it years later. She sees a tent with Drogo and their unborn son, representing the afterlife that awaits her. Most tellingly, she feels drawn to these visions with an emotional intensity that transcends mere curiosity, as if part of her recognizes these scenes on a soul-deep level. This recognition suggests not prophecy, but memory, her future self's memories bleeding backward through time. The warlocks of the House of the Undying possess magic that explicitly transcends normal limitations of time and space. Their very title, Undying, hints at existence beyond normal temporal boundaries. What better conduit for a time loop than a magical location specifically designed to connect past, present, and future? The blue-lipped warlocks didn't create the visions Daenerys saw. They merely provided the magical framework that allowed her future self to reach backward. This theory explains the peculiar recursive quality of Daenerys' arc. Her story begins with fire, emerging unburnt from Drogo's pyre, and ends with fire, destroying King's Landing, creating a closed loop mirroring the Ouroboros. the dragon eating its own tail, a symbol of eternity. Her growing fixation on her family's words, fire and blood, represents not character deterioration, but temporal contamination, echoes of her future self's fatalism bleeding into her present consciousness. The most compelling evidence comes from Daenerys's increasing sense of destiny and inevitability as the series progresses. Her declaration that burning King's Landing was necessary to break the wheel takes on new meaning in this light, not just breaking the wheel of feudal oppression, but attempting to break the wheel of time itself, the endless cycle she unconsciously senses herself trapped within. Her growing certainty that this is my destiny reflects not megalomania, but tragic recognition of the inescapable pattern she is doomed to repeat. This interpretation transforms our understanding of Daenerys's final moments. Jon's knife ending. Her life represents not merely assassination, but potential mercy, a release from the temporal prison her consciousness occupies. Her final expression of betrayal mixed with recognition suggests she finally understands the loop she has been caught in, perhaps even accepting death as the only escape from endless repetition of her tragic arc. Drogon's decision to melt the Iron Throne rather than kill Jon supports this reading. If some part of the dragon shares Daenerys' awareness of the time loop, he recognizes that destroying the symbolic object at the center of her destructive pattern offers the only hope of breaking the cycle. By carrying her body east, perhaps toward places of ancient magic like Ashai or the Shadowlands, Drogon may be seeking magical means to truly free his mother's soul from the temporal prison, her final act of destruction created. The haunting quality of Daenerys' story thus takes on metaphysical dimensions. Her tragedy lies not just in her fall from liberator to destroyer, but in being trapped in an eternal recurrence of that fall, forever trying to warn herself through dreams and visions, forever failing to change her fate. In this reading, the Song of Ice and Fire becomes a melody played in endless repetition, a temporal tragedy as much as a human one. The unspoken truth of George R.R. Martin's saga has always been that magic, though subdued, remains the foundation upon which the world of ice and fire stands. These 18 theories illuminate the hidden currents of magic, prophecy, and ancient blood that flow beneath the surface of political machinations and personal ambitions. From the secret bloodlines that shape destinies to the forgotten pacts that bind generations, from the misunderstood prophecies to the terrible prices of power, the true story of Westeros exists in these spaces between what characters know and what history records. As you drift towards sleep, consider how differently we might understand this tale if we could see beyond the limited perspectives of those who lived it. If we could know the truth of Rhaegar's obsession, the Night King's purpose, or Daenerys' visions, perhaps in dreams like the dragon dreams of Targaryens or the green dreams of the children of the forest, we might glimpse the deeper patterns that connect all these threads into the tapestry of a song that began long before our characters were born and will continue long after their deaths, the eternal song of ice and fire.